why do I have to take responsibility for it? What's my role in this? But what he did was terrible. What was my contribution in this? How do I fix this?
He was ready, and he was tired of being that person that he was being over and over. So he was ready to submit, and he was in that space, and I wasn't. I was not in that submissive space with the Lord. So it took me longer to get there and recognize my own issues and let them go.
Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. We're your hosts, Robert and Kaylee.
And we are so excited that you guys are here.
This is our special once a month call where we actually have a live studio audience. And so if you want to join us, click the link at the U.S. Christian Chamber site. You can go to the events and join us, because then you get the extra stuff after the interview, which is the Q&A live with our guests, as well as get to know other married entrepreneurs around the country. Today, we have some special guests. We've known them for a while, and so finally get to have them on our podcast. Raymond and Leslie Funk. They're ordained ministers.
You better behave.
Entrepreneurs and certified NRA and USCCA instructors. In other words, firearms instructors.
That sounds dangerous.
Okay, so get this. Ministers, firearm instructors. Okay. And the founders of the nonprofit Three Chord Marriage. They are known for creating a safe space for couples with high stakes calling in kingdom and country. Having overcome infidelity, addiction, and emotional trauma in their own marriage, they now equip couples with battle-tested tools, biblical strategy, and tactical insights to break strongholds, reclaim unity, and walk in the purpose God designed for the relationship. Their strategy: train couples to fight, or I added this, shoot. See what I did there, honey? For unity, so they could lead with greater authority from the overflow of a thriving marriage. Their mission: strengthen marriage, defend the family, transform nations. Raymond and Leslie, welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
Wow, thank you so much for having us here. Thank you for that introduction too, by the way. That was awesome.
No, you're welcome. So yeah, we've known you for a little while now. I don't know, it's been a few years, 4 years or so. And it's been a pleasure to get to know you. We got to meet in person finally last year at the U.S. Christian Chamber Expo.
Yeah.
And so excited to kind of dig into a little bit. We know your story, we've heard it, but we always like to unpack more, because I know there's more, right? We don't know everything about you, and neither does anyone else in the audience. So let's just get right into it. You both have successful careers, actually thriving business, and then that's, you're doing well, you're married for a while, and then things just started to unravel a little bit. So just I don't know where you want to start with this, but tell us, what happened? What was going on? What was the business going on, and what was the marriage like? And then all of a sudden, what started to unravel here?
Yeah, well, short story is that when we got married, we didn't have a relationship with God or Christ. And so we were living very worldly lives. We came together under, I guess, what would be okay by the world circumstances, but certainly not by biblical circumstances. I was married at the time when we met. And so we kind of led this life coming together. And then as we got married, we still had all of the baggage and stuff brought with us. We started then a business, like you mentioned, developed that into a thriving business, but all of the underpinnings of the baggage and the lack of relationship with Christ is really what started to unravel things, because we weren't intentional about each other. We thought, like the world thought, well, you're married now, so everything's just going to be peachy. It just happens, and things are beautiful and rosy. Didn't really understand what the covenant was of marriage, because it was just, in our minds, to some degree, it was a piece of paper. And because I had all that brokenness, I started to kind of fall back into my old habits of getting too close with people at work, and one thing led to another. And that's how the marriage started to unravel, just because we were too much in the world.
We were, still two broken people, not really realizing we needed really deep levels of healing. So coming together, marriage is supposed to change you and enhance you and bring out those areas that you need healing. And that certainly happened.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it just didn't continue to be intentional about each other and connecting, and just kind of slowly, it was like the slow drift, I guess. And then all of a sudden something else, someone else looks more attractive, or what?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's the slow drift. I think that there is, because we both came broken and so much kind of through just my walk as I got to know Christ, and so many things became revealed by having the right people around me. But in the season where we weren't walking with Christ, all that brokenness inside just had me in this cycle of adultery, because, the butterflies go away eventually, right? And statistically, it's about 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, all of that butterfly effect and all of all that stuff kind of goes away in many cases. And people
But like the
aren't ready
monarchs, don't they come back?
but they all swarm away to some way, like they migrate,
Yeah.
right? So like the monarchs, those feelings, right? Feelings can come and go, but it's our commitment, and we just didn't have that foundation. And so, when you don't understand who we are in Christ, and then we start to live a life based on our feelings, as soon as things start to change, you start to think, well, maybe she's not the person for me. Maybe she's not the right one. And then all of a sudden you start talking with the wrong people at work. And the next thing you know, attractions form that shouldn't be there, and relationships go beyond what they should, because trying to fill that brokenness with something. Yeah. And in my case, it was the butterflies.
And I think, like on my end, could have been fallen into complacency. It's like, oh, now I've got him. He's here. He's not going to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, and I think what happens in those situations, it's a very, right. That's what's beautiful about Christ. Christ really helps us understand that we're supposed to live a very selfless life, and especially in our marriages too, right? So my role as a good husband is to think about, one, to have my relationship with God first, but then to also put her first. What does she need from me? What's my part in the marriage, and how do I do my part to love her well and be responsible for what I'm supposed to be responsible for? And what happens is, when you're living a very selfish life, you just think about, well, this is what I need, and they're not giving that to me. And so it's not my fault that the marriage is suffering, it's her fault, or vice versa.
So you're saying that's how you felt.
Yeah, that's how I lived, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy when you've got a mixed up perspective to just expect your marriage to be good based on your spouse. Like, it's their responsibility to make sure you have a good marriage. Yeah. And the truth is, it's my responsibility.
So we both weren't serving each other.
Yeah, because it's so easy to you just finger point, basically. Just intense way of just finger pointing, because it's easier to, right, look at the speck in somebody else's eye and then look at the log in your own, right? So, so the first place is to us, but it's so, it's hard to take accountability. It's so much easier to just point the finger and just blame. And then that's where it goes, right? Then we're just pointing, just blaming each other. And then now we're just in this cycle of insanity. And how do you get out of it? You can't until somebody breaks that cycle of insanity by just starting to take accountability. So what happened here? So what was the breaking point to now we got to make a change? What happened? How did that come about?
Wow, it was a process, but really we knew we needed to make a change when it came to light that I was having an affair, when we separated. There were a lot of things that went into it that, it wasn't necessarily one instance where it's like, okay, we need to do better. I think for me personally, it was getting to the point in my life where I hit rock bottom, and I really got to the point where I just couldn't stand the person I was anymore. And I knew I couldn't fix it, and I needed something more. And that was, Christ.
So did you guys find a church, or what happened?
We were in church, and we had gone to counseling, throughout all of this, in and out, and then Fidelity. It just got to one point where one of our pastors, I got to the point I was like, I'm done. I already forgave him. I'm not forgiving him again, because it did happen twice. And our pastor was like, please, just one more shot. Go meet with this woman, pastoral counseling. And we were like, okay. And that was when we shared our story. And it was the first time we were sitting across from someone who looked at us both as individuals and pointed out, Leslie, you're broken. Raymond, you're broken. Before we can address the marriage issues, we need to address your individual healing. And so that was the moment and point that Raymond was like, whoa, finally, like, I'm not being blamed for it all, even though he was the one that was acting it all out and causing, quote unquote, what everybody saw. And so, it was just a process over several months, just submitting to the Holy Spirit. because it was not truly, it wasn't her counseling us. It was her facilitating and leading us into a conversation with the Godhead and allowing him to expose the lies that we've believed about ourselves since we were kids, and then replacing that with God's truth, our true identity, and then seeing each other through the eyes of Christ. And that's when we were able to start building it right.
So Leslie, how, because Raymond has the affair, but it is true, it does take two. We contribute to this thing. But how did you feel like, wait a second, he's the one that did this, so why do I have to take responsibility for it? What's my role in this? But so how did that come about, where you finally you did say, had to submit to the Lord about, okay, what he did was terrible. What was my contribution in this? How do I fix this? How that come about, where you had that aha, okay, I didn't have to take accountability for my part in this?
Well, it's funny because I did feel like that. I was like, when I was going through my healing, sessions and process, Raymond had less meetings. What are they called? Less sessions.
So what?
And I'm like, he's the one that's messed up, not me. Why do I have to keep going? And the difference was what he mentioned, that he was ready and he was tired of being that person that he was being over and over. So he was ready to submit, and he was in that space, and I wasn't. I was not in that submissive space with the Lord. So it took me longer to get there and recognize my own issues and let them go.
So how were you able, Leslie, to forgive him? Because I know it sounds so simple. Oh, forgive you. You know what I mean? But then, at least for me, I haven't gone through that infidelity, but sometimes you forgive somebody, but that doesn't mean it's gone. Like, I don't have those feelings towards you anymore and I feel fine. And it's just, you're released of that. How were you able to get to that place? Because so many people, Christians or non-Christian, get divorced over this because they can't get to the other side of it.
Yeah. So I think a big part of it was that the grace of the Lord allowing me to see Raymond through his eyes, separating the sinner from the sin, that was not truly who he was. It was really the enemy of his soul that he allowed to listen to what he wanted and just follow his flesh. So I think that was the start of it, that I was able to separate the sinner from the sin. The second is really God's word. He tells me if I don't forgive, he's not going to forgive me. I don't deserve the forgiveness that Jesus gave me. So am I better than Jesus and hold unforgiveness, So, and for me, it just really, because it happened twice, right? So we went through the forgiveness, and I was like, that's why when it happened again, I'm like, no, I'm not going to. And yet the Lord said, yes, you are. And it's a process. So, and forgiveness and rebuilding the trust, right? So I forgave, and yes, there were triggers, and it was a process. I would see Raymond on his phone and I'd be thinking, oh, who's he talking to? What's he doing? So it was a continual forgiving, like over and over. You have to continue to take it to the Lord, because it's not forgive and forget. And then he also, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I had to do my part in that. Like, I had to facilitate what she needed for her healing. So when it truly came, because the recognition of our own brokenness and starting on that journey opened my eyes up to a lot of things, and really just a self-understanding. But what I learned from all of it too is that I have to do my part in her healing. So like when she was said, if there were things that were triggers, if there was, everything became open book, passwords, and doing everything that I could to not trigger her. And then the biggest thing on top of all that was understanding the timing, that it wasn't my timing. Because as guys, and even more so, I think, as the one that stepped outside the marriage, the flesh wants to get to a point where you're like we've been through this, and it's been a couple of weeks, and like why are we still talking? Like, we talked about this, it's done. Okay, let's just move on. Yeah. You not understand. So that's the fleshly part. But I had to understand, like, I broke a covenant. It wasn't just, I'm sorry, I'm late for dinner type of thing. It was like I destroyed the foundation of what we had. And so in that, it wasn't my time, right? It's like I had to just give her the space to heal the way she needed to and forgive the way she needed to. So I just went through this season where I surrendered all of my freedom, is a good way to put it, to Leslie, so that she could see that I was becoming someone who was trustworthy again.
That's big. So I was going to ask, this perfect lead in to, how did you fix, repair, and heal this marriage? But then what are some of the disciplines, the regular daily or weekly disciplines that you do to continue to stay strong, even as you've had this new ministry now, and you're doing a lot of things, you're involved with the Christian chambers, there's so much stuff going on, and how in the midst of that do you stay connected? Because you may not have another affair again, but the affair can happen in different ways, to your business, to ministry, right? So what we're talking about, you talked about two things I picked up: patience and avoiding triggers, which is huge, and helping avoid conflict, or if it happens, how do we deal with it? So what are some things that you guys had to do besides those two things that to start to heal the marriage, which I'm assuming led into some ongoing disciplines, because I think it'll help every couple, regardless if they had an affair or not. These are just key principles that will help every relationship stay strong.
Yeah, well, for me, it's continuing to rehearse the truth. So, through the healing process, I wrote down the truths that I heard the Lord tell me from his word. So sometimes I have to go back and rehearse and reread those specific ones, but it is also continuing to build upon that. So, as you continue to live and grow, other things are going to come at you to try to trip you up. So it is that constant being in the word alone, every day by myself. And then it's wonderful because we'll sit and share, we'll read the word about the same time and then be like, oh my gosh, I don't understand that. So it's being able to study the word together. We pray together. We do our best to do it every single day. Sometimes we do skip, but that is something huge. And that's what keeps us connected. And then also, we went through this process that now we're certified to do. It's called a marriage reboot, Married for a Purpose marriage reboot. And what it does, it allowed us to define our marriage purpose, the purpose that God brought us together for, and then also come together with a vision for like 8 areas of our life. So we continually keep that in front of us. That's the target that we're both shooting for. So we continue to just look at the bigger picture together.
And I think as far as things that keep us on course, it's like Leslie was sharing. For me personally, and I'll speak for me because I truly, through this whole experience, I believe that the temperature of the relationship is, it takes both people, but it's the husband's responsibility to lead that. And that's, I may get, some people may argue with me about that, but I think if, I've heard people say, if you want to know how good a marriage is doing, look at the wife, right? Because it's my responsibility to keep her safe, to love her well, right? And to lead in the home. And so I think one of the things, just understanding, what does that mean to her? Because, I can have my own ideas of what makes her feel safe, and all guys' perspective on what it is that makes her feel safe and what she needs from me. But if we don't have an understanding of that, I don't have an understanding of that, then how can I serve her well? And that was what's beautiful about the reboot, is it brings people together for that common ground. Not saying you become the same person, but you share now a vision, right? Because we each have, God's given us each a purpose, but then together as a husband and wife, there's even a greater purpose that God has for us. But my job is to make sure I understand what she needs to feel loved and safe and whole, and lead her in that, provide that space for her.
Yeah.
No, and I do an okay job.
That's good. And so what I hear too, and we have this in our household too, don't make assumptions. I think sometimes we try to love each other in the way we want to be loved, but not so much with the other person. And so we just kind of assume things and we just do. And then we get upset because we need to know, we get a whole conflict. There's a couple early on in our coaching stuff where he was starting his law firm, and we're on the call together, and he was saying, yeah, sometimes I feel so alone in this journey of entrepreneurship. And then she's looking at him like, what do you mean alone? I bring you lunch to the office, and I do this, I do that, I do this, and I do that. I asked the husband, I said, what do you need? When you say alone, what do you mean by that? And he basically, it came down to, he felt emotionally alone, not physically alone. So she was giving acts of service. He needed more emotional support, right? More affirmations. And so once we checked in with that, clarified that, then she's like, oh, I can do that. And she's a nurse educator, and that's what she does in her job, was just love on people, right? Empathize. I mean, she's dealing with death situations a lot. So, I mean, that was just part of her, who she was anyway. But here she was kind of assuming he needed one thing and then what he needed was something else. But so that clarification, those check-ins I think are huge. The pray together, you've heard us talk about it, right? The statistics are, there's a kind of a little bit of a myth or fake news that the divorce rate in the church is the same as outside the church. And that research was based on kind of basically a survey that just said, are you a Christian or you're Catholic or Muslim or whatever? And it was what I call the check the box Christian. So if you look at the check the box Christians, yes, the divorce rate is about the same. But when you start to look at some of the other research that digs into, are you really walking the walk? Like, are you involved at church? And then all that stuff. The more involved they were in their church community and their faith, the divorce rate lowers all the way down to praying daily together, where the divorce rate is a fraction of 1%. It's basically 1 in 1,100.
Yeah.
And so we do have the tools. We have the God-given tools to keep a strong marriage. But some of the simplest things we can do, because even I was resistant for a while, was pray daily together. I'm a PK. Maybe that was my PTSD coming out. But Kaylee was like, "Oh, we should pray together. We should pray together." And I was like, "Okay," but never did. And then I don't know what happened to me. At one point, I said, "Okay, let's do this." This was about 6-7 years ago. And I'm sure, as you notice, you see the relationship just stronger because not only are you praying daily together, but you bring God into the center of the relationship all at once. So you're bringing God into the center of the relationship, and you're connecting as husband and wife. And when you're praying blessings over each other, I mean,
how can you go wrong?
You gotta love them.
Pretty hard to be mad at your spouse while you're praying for him. So
That's real.
And that's a 3-chord marriage.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of that, good segue. Speaking of that, as we close up, how do guns and marriage, how are they related? How did they help you? How did guns help your marriage?
Well, I'll start when we were reconciling after our separation. That was something that allowed us to rebuild trust. So starting to do shooting sports together. Because while he was out of the house, I became interested in it, went to women's shooting groups. And when he came back home, it was an opportunity to do a shared activity, have some connection time, be able to not only enjoy it together, but then have something to talk about later on. So we did that, and also some self-defense training. So with it being a part of our story, when we were called to do 3-chord marriage, we felt the Lord wanted us to include that.
Yeah. I mean, as you engage more with us, and we've got a great event we do for a day. That's Tactical Marriage Training Day, where we actually do some tactical pistol training and house clearing, and then relate that all back to your marriage. There's a lot of similarities, but I'm just reminded in Nehemiah 4:17, it talks about the rebuilding of the wall, right? And it says that the people that rebuilt the wall had a tool in one hand for construction and a weapon in the other. And that to me speaks of building and defense. And that's really what we're supposed to do. Let's train, let's get better in our marriage. It's not just about like seeking help when you're at the lowest, right? Like we're about to get a divorce and we don't know what to do and we don't like each other. And so somebody help us. It's not that. It's staying in it and training, because that's what we do with everything else in our life. But our marriage just kind of gets taken for granted and sometimes takes a back seat, especially for business leaders, people who are always in this phase, pastors and law enforcement, where they're pouring out continuously into others. They live this very outward focused life. And sometimes the relationship at home takes a back seat to that. And so it's really about those basic concepts. We're building and we're training to get better, but then we have to defend. We need to be in a position to defend that against the attacks of the enemy.
So we use a natural weapon really to emphasize the spiritual weapons that we have in our marriage. And then the tool that you have in your hand are all these other, like marriage tools, communication hacks and, date nights and all those kinds of things. Those are the tools.
Yeah. No, that's great. I heard this comedian recently. It says, when you bring guns into a marriage, you really have to have a lot of trust with each other.
Well, and it's funny because, for me personally, when we first were marketing our Tactical Marriage Day, and that was, we were using live fire, we would get some crazy things coming. And I'm like, see, that's what we're fighting against in our country. And, the way people think of marriage, like, why can't I go to the shooting range with my spouse without people being concerned?
Well, and what's really been beautiful is with the tactical marriage day that we do. I mean, we've had pastors, leaders in the church, we've had law enforcement officers in the day, and it is one of those things. It's like, I'll just have to say, it's totally a Holy Spirit day, but it's one of those things you have to experience to understand it truly. Because we've had all the broad spectrum, everybody that leaves. We're hearing things like, wow, I've been training, I've been in law enforcement for almost, 25 years, and never one day did I ever relate everything that I do day in and day out to my marriage. And now it's just so much more. It's really beautiful to see couples and that are good, right? They're in a good place, but just to leave leveled up and just connected in a way that they weren't before. So
awesome. Well, Raymond and Leslie, thank you for sharing your story. This is great. Lots of good nuggets and takeaways. You don't have to be going through a tough marriage to take some of these tools and these principles and apply them to your marriage today, because it'll only get better. And if you want to get a hold of them, threechordmarriage.com. And if you're in the Orlando area, go check out one of their events and those tactical shooting things. I know we want to try and do that one time if the timing ever works out. Or you can have them come out to you, right? They can always do an event out in your areas. Yeah, get a hold of them. And I know you'll be blessed. So Raymond and Leslie, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having us. We love you guys.
All right. And thank you for listening. I know this has touched you and blessed you. So please share this with another married entrepreneur that needs to hear this. And until next week, God bless. Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.